Hello, this is AcktionKermit, and welcome to the after-chapter discussion for Chapter 8.64 of The Wandering Inn. We will be discussing the events of the chapter and the questions that the chapter raises. If you'd like to bring up a theory or a discussion topic, please post it in the reaction comments channel so that we can see it. We'll start with a quick summary of the events of the chapter and a few thoughts before we get into the questions and open up the floor. So, there are two plot lines in the chapter. There's the Rhyme battle and there's the Wistram battle. In Rhyme, Nawal makes a bloody sword to try to clear her perceived debt to Thlos. Venice Cruceland picks up the sword and tries to, using it for a while before destroying it, believed the cost of allowing its continued existence was too high. He fights alone against Naravia's army until Marisar is killed, and then he flies into a rage. The Karas saves the day with disguised assassins and clever plans. In Wistram, there's a four-way fight between the mages, golems, and the Earther rescue parties and the Emeris rescue party. The mages attack the golems strike back. Some Earthers get out with the drakes and the drowned folk. The Karas saves the day again with arcane power and clever plans. Archmage Nahuai was killed and Emeris is freed. Wistram is in shambles and is about to face some very awkward questions about why they were holding so many innocent Earthers captive.
You forgot the pirates. The Ghazi escape plan of the pirates arriving to save the.
Oh yeah, that's another pretty big thing there. I consider that as part of the Emeris escape group though, because they were hired. So let's see. Some general thoughts before we dive in though. Most of the fighting in this chapter was gloves on, except where the Kingdom of Destruction's people were. You could see it would have been a way worse bloodbath if so many people hadn't shown restraint. Credit goes to Venice for destroying the blood sword before it could become a doomsday level threat. You know, there was talking briefly about how it would drink the ichor from the stars, and that's just not good. So,
kill Nawal. It would have seen that the first thing it would do would kill Dear Smith, which is, I think, why he mainly stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's see, we'll be getting to that stuff in a second. I just want to roll through this quickly. Also, world powers may well change their attitude towards Earthers after this engagement. Earthers have been around long enough so that you can't consider them outsiders anymore. They have entanglements, they have factions that they're connected to, and so on, and that's just going to change the way everyone reacts. And they really should have been more suspicious of Trey by this point, but it just didn't occur to them until now. So, another thing that occurred to me is that practically everything about this engagement undermines Eldavin at the worst possible moment. He was going to release the Earthers on himself, but now it's out of his hands, and even if he said he was going to release him, it won't sound as credible. And, just all of that. And he runs the risk of a two-front conflict with Rhyme and Island Damas, which are two of the most dangerous nations out there. So, and also the Karas did an amazing job of just carrying the whole team. So, before we get into the questions that I have written down here, is there anything that people want to say in reaction and comments? Okay, so yeah, Kelara is just saying tag the talk, we're good. Pooh Dancer says that I don't think that Venice destroyed the sword because it would have been a threat to Rhyme. I thought that Venice destroyed the sword because he didn't think Nawal should sacrifice herself. I think there's a lot of truth to that. He looked at both Nawal and Marisar before destroying the sword, and he noticed that it was made out of broken pride and that sort of thing. And it certainly would have been bad for the Kingdom of Destruction in the long term. But the more immediate deciding factor, I thought, was like you said, that Nawal should not sacrifice her life to make something this terrible. So, all right. Number one of the main questions here, let's open this up. How will the Earther breakout in Wistram affect the world? More generally, how do you think this conflict will change Wistram? That's a question from Rosie. Rosie, you wanted to say something?
I guess I'll start up since it was my question. Yeah, I think it's something to really consider that, we've heard now that they've gone off with various factions. The Laws apparently got some, the Drakes apparently got more, as did the Drowned Folk. Some were caught, and clearly Trey ended up with a group. And I think it's really going to end up fueling possibly an industrial race, kind of trying to invent the things the Earthers come up with. Wistram started it. A lot of them will have now a lot of background of what knowledge they have is useful or not. And I think it's really maybe going to kickstart a lot of things for good and bad in terms of new inventions to this world and combining Earth knowledge with magic. And then in terms of Wistrom, I just think I feel like shit's gonna get worse for them before it gets better because they haven't even figured out an Archmage has died, which that's gonna shock the world. And Cognita has shown that she can smack them down whenever she wants, and she's probably gonna have choice words with them about how this whole situation turned out. And she may even withdraw all the golems. So I really think there's a decent chance that Wistrom itself may crumble at its foundations. I mean, who's going to want to send their kid there after, it actually became a shit show and we don't even know what the death count is?
Yeah, and also it seems likely that smaller powers are going to become aware of Earthers as well, not just the few major powers who have known so far. Wiggles, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a huge shakeup in general because we have so many things that have gone wrong for Wistrom here. They've lost, you know, I'm just gonna say half their Earthers. I have no idea how much it really is, but let's just say they lost half their Earthers. Drake's got some, the Drowned Folk got some, and Floss got some. So that alone is just it's gonna jumpstart the conflict of fighting over Earthers. And then there's also Nolly dying and Amaris being freed. And I think that will really allow Emerhane to try and get a foothold or more of a foothold into Wistrom with that power vacuum going on. Also, Eldavan in Tarandria is going to hear about this, and he's not going to be happy that uh, Wistrom was basically ransacked in his absence, and so much went wrong.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, I just think it's going to be a very big shakeup.
yeah, definitely. Mr. Europe, you wanted to say something?
I think apart from anything else, I think that Niley dying will also have huge effects on other plot lines. Like, for example, the whole Jungle Tales conspiracy in Valoros is probably going to be hugely affected by the Lizard Archmage dying, and like that whole plot just seems to spiral more and more into chaos.
Mm. Okay, and Lino, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to add that because of that sacking Wistram by pirates and other people, the whole reputation of Wistram may just crumble because people don't think anymore that Wistram is impossible to take or impossible to be attacked, because as just they saw, you can attack it, you can go in, take what you want, and go back. Of course, you can suffer losses at that, but it's not something that is impossible. So, like, whole reputation of Wistram is crumbling at this moment.
Well, one we know, the reputation is a lot around Cognita. Two, we know that it was ransacked before. It's not the first time it ransacked, but I don't actually remember if that's not like long ago history.
That was long ago. That's the case. For a long time, it wasn't sacked, just until now.
Yeah, I think it exposed some pretty significant weaknesses on the part of everyone who's not Eldavan Incognita over there in Wistram. Polaric, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about hastily saying, Wistrom is kind of getting sucked up, because look at Festival, which is the other prominent magical institution, and their reputation has been completely sullied by their involvement in the entire, Nullish magical suppression conspiracy. So I don't know. I think it's too early to say about Wistrom's reputation.
So let's see. M. Eli asked, how is the god of magic going to manipulate Aaron and Wistrom for their end goals? That is a great question, and I think it's a bit early to tell. I think when they were debating the Earthers about whether or not to leave, Emarain may have seen some of the chaos that Trey was trying to sow and tried to override Aaron into heading it off. But Aaron, fought back for his own autonomy, and that was a good thing for Aaron. But they clearly don't have the most cooperative relationship right now, and that didn't really help, I think. Let's see. Yeah, so God on the Stake wanted to say something?
Yes, I was actually just kind of thinking, we were talking about Eldiven in relation to all this, and I do think it's actually one area for potential interest is the idea that this all looks really convenient from the outside. Eldiven takes his entire faction, departs Wistrom within a couple of days. It's raided, ransacked, his primary rivals are disgraced, are dead, all instigated by someone he'd functionally taking on as apprentice. From an outside perspective, this looks really suspicious, even though we ourselves, of course, know that Eldiven isn't involved. It really looks rather suspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rosie says that she agrees that it's going to make a lot of people turn on Wistrom and remove their reliance on it for mages and messages and so on, which is not good for them in the long term. So it looks like we have no further comments on this question, so I'm going to move on to the next one, which is that Faline and the other centrist mages, when they fought each other, are clearly pulling their punches in this fight. Will it be possible for Faline to mend bridges with the Academy at some point? Polaric, you wanted to say something?
I think so, considering the centrists are no longer like a dominant power. Like, Wisdom's entire power structure is shaked up. It's chaos everywhere. So, who knows?
Yeah, Faline is really a person with high integrity, though, and the centrists have not necessarily always acted like that. So, Ashok says that it looks like it's also possible to return to Wistrom as long as you're influential enough. So, yeah, that's a good question. I wonder if Faline could develop her own influence outside the Academy. And Polaric is agreeing with Ashok there. Hans is saying that Nali is dead, and the other archmages probably won't hold too much of a grudge against another high-level mage, especially when high-level mages are really needed right now. F in the chat for Archmage Nali Hual. So let's see. There are no other responses to this question, so I'm going to move on to the next one. And that is when Yalos defeats Kalak in a duel, Kalak says that this trick would work on a soldier but not an adventurer, the thing that he does with hooking his shield. So what are the trade-offs in a soldier's training regimen that makes their leaders decide that this is acceptable? They're clearly focusing on something else if they're not doing all those dirty tricks. So
mass battle is inherently different than the more compact individual battles that adventurers do. Adventurers rarely battle humanoid enemies in one-on-one. This is armies rarely battle humans and one-on-one. Usually fight in a mass. Adventure happen. There are humanoid enemies that you can encounter, undead, dirty fights. It's a different sort of combat. Where in a war, like, you aren't going, unless you're meeting someone really high level. It's not. It's more of a sweet. It's not really something for individual battles that of dirty tricks and the sorts.
So, that's a good breakdown of the topic, I think. Moving on to question 4, it says that Archmage Nalihual calls Verdun Blackwood a coward in her mind for choosing to take and hold territory in the halls of the Academy, rather than taking the conflict directly to the enemy like the rest of the Archmages. But first impressions can be deceiving, though, because the Dullahans are such a martial culture. It makes you wonder what is the strategic logic behind Verdun Blackwood's decision. Hans says maybe he's a coward, but he survived. That's also true. I wrote that question before we got the end of the chapter, and the Archmage Nalahual died to the Karas. So, Pooh Dancer says that Verdun is dead and Nali isn't. Verdun is playing to mitigate losses. I was thinking myself that he was thinking in terms of taking and holding territory. The more land you restore order to, the more you can shove the invaders off of it, and they'll find it much harder to maneuver and attack and do anything. So Verdun, in the long run, is trying to suppress all disorder and throw them out once and for all. God on the Snake says that he has no stake in the fight, basically, and he's got no Earthers to lose, which is also a pretty good point. Rosie says that Verdun may be either taking control of a larger faction, hold in the end chaos, or end up on top, which is another good, interesting speculation. Kilara says that the strategic aspect is straightforward. Pick a couple of choke points and hold them. It can't be confused by the dog of war, might be able to entrap a few enemies. I guess that's fog of war. And then capture anyone who wanders by, which is another good point. And we're waiting on a couple of people who are typing right now. So yeah, that was another good point about Verdon Blackwood is the only archmage on the council who was not tied up with this Earther scandal. Like you said, he didn't have any, so he may have a better reputation coming out of this as well. Mr. Wiggles wanted to say something?
Reputation about what?
Well, if it turns out to be a scandal that they were holding all these Earthers against their will and there was really no, wrong that they had done to justify that, it may play out.
I don't know if by in-world standard it would be a scandal of sorts. It's like, maybe that's just my opinion. It's like holding hostages and holding people in captivity is just not something.
Yeah, in Terrandaria, the Sleepy Queen's kingdom, they seem to be spitting mad about the whole idea. Pooh Dancer is saying, honestly, I feel like the better way was to negotiate rather than to be martial in the approach. If the mages teamed up with the golems, I felt like everything would have been over for the chaos creation parties. And yeah, that's a really good point. The lack of trust between the golems and the mages has been brewing for centuries, though, and it's hard to steer that ship suddenly. Polaric is saying he might disagree with the martial culture of the Dullahans, considering there seems to be two types of archmages. The more academic like Feor and Verdun versus the ones who got their levels by fighting like Eldavan and Amaris. I go back to Veiltouch's conversation about Trey, where he remarks about Eldavan in 8.12 that Eldavan believes that a mage should risk life and limb. We get so many chances over his lifespan. Why cut it short for a gamble? But that might be a bit long-winded answer for essentially saying that, yes, he's a bit of a coward, which is another interesting point. I'm just thinking about like the defining political block of the Dullahans is the Iron Vanguard. They have to have something like that going around in Made. Just the thing with coming in with the bloody feathers and claiming that she was feeding her pet bird when they exploded that ward was just a masterstroke. I love that. So Spanner is also saying they're a hierarchical culture, but not necessarily a martial one, which is also true. And Kel is saying R.I.P. Beaky, which is, another absolutely important thing. Beaky gave his life for the cause. Okay, so it looks like we're moving on now, and the next question is, could Trey's decision to free himself by creating a disposable life-sand golem come back to bite him later? Will this change Minnie-Z's understanding of how far she can trust Trey? I don't really think that she has a very sophisticated mind at this point, but she has the potential to evolve based on what some of the mages have been saying, and it seems like the possibilities up there. She might reflect, oh darn, if Trey gets in a jam, that might be me next. So, I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but that was just a sudden thought that I had while I was reading that section. Spanner wants to say something?
On Minnie-Z, it was brought up before that she's more of a symbiotic, almost parasitic relationship with Trey. And it's mentioned a couple of times that if she gets more powerful than him, he best watch out. So, given that she's now not learning to trust him a little bit more, but realizing, oh, actually, yeah, he can do this, that, and the other with me, it might work a bit better. Almost like, and I hate this comparison, the film Venom with Tom Hardy. You know what I mean, though?
What are we talking about? Minnie-Z not trusting, maybe not trusting. Why?
Because Minitach gave his life for the cause too. He touched that ward to free Trey and then exploded, and then Minnie-Z comes rushing in, sees this dead life sand golem that Trey made instantly and then killed instantly.
But I mean, Minnie-Z exploded many times already. This will not be the first time she would be exploding.
Yeah, but Minitach was destroyed. But anyway, let's look at some other people's reactions here because they're piling up. Mr. Europe says the way he sees it, the lifespan golem stared up at him and then collected the remains of the lifespan scattered around. It seems more like she thought, hey, free body mass than anything else, which is another, good reasoning of it. Grid Cube says Mini Z was used as a decoy several times. She knows that she can be remade in wakes if broken. She has no issue with being destroyed. Okay, which is fair. So then Polaric posts a quote about the half-elf blinking a few times. I suppose that's Archmage Feor, I guess, would be the half-elf. I don't remember which half-elf that is. Or maybe it's Eldavin, I don't know. Supporting whoever said that lifespan golems might get out of control, yes. I was thinking about Torrin too when I was raising those concerns. That's what Kel mentions here. She's a bit like Torrin. She knows that she can get broken and be rebuilt. God and the Snake says the real topic would be if lifespan golems have continuity of consciousness. And Polaric just points out that was Eldavin. So good. And I think that's everybody's answers here. So let's move on to the next question. Do you think that Illifraze's spell book might make its way to Saria somehow via Ghazi and Amaris? So, the possibility is there. They're all going to be in Chandra. Mr. Wiggles.
We know Amaris already. Everyone's typing yes, basically, but we know Amaris was the one who initially gave it over to, what was it? It was either Charles or Timor. I forget which it was, but she was the one who originally gave it over to him and wanted him to give it to Saria. So as long as she remembers that and they somehow get in contact with her, I think she's going to try and get it to her, yes.
Yeah, I agree with Ashok that there's hype for the spellbook finally getting back to Saria. That'll be a huge positive.
It was to a random Drake who sold it to Charles, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, Mr. Europe, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I agree, and also I'd point out that we see from this chapter that Amaris takes her deals and her word very seriously. I don't see any way that the only reason why she wouldn't instantly give it to Saria would be if Ghazi doesn't want to part with her new shiny book. And seeing as how they're good friends, I don't see that happening either.
Quilliman, you wanted to say something? Okay, good. Quilliman says that he's all sorted. So it looks like there are no further observations. Polaric says that Pisces got a new spellbook now. Saria needs hers. Yes, they can be buddies that way. They're going to have a huge spellbook collection of the Wandering Inn by the time they get back together. Combine that with the memories that Heron is hopefully going to retain from the Deadlands, and that would be quite the little magic academy they're building. So moving on to question 7. When questioned by Wistrom students, Trey answered that part of why Flos awoke was to avenge the murder of Dravish. That wasn't the exact reason, it's a partial truth. And, since Trey is becoming this chaos schemer now, that's a partial truth with political consequences. So what other secrets about Flos could Trey weaponize against Rhyme's enemies in the court of public opinion? Poodancer says that Trey could weaponize his agenda, which is the freeing of the slaves and also the destruction of Actelios Salash, which is going to matter a lot if the old ones keep coming out of the last tide, like it looks like. The betrayal of the Minotaurs, potentially. I don't entirely remember that off the top of my head. God of the Snake, can you refresh my memory there? Quilliman wants to say something.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. That's an old theory of mine from back when the Minos first invaded, which was basically the reason how they were able, because it's pointed out by the Minotaurs that they fought Floss in close combat at sea rather than engaged him at range with the ballistas, etc. Now, the question I raised and what made this theory was, why would they be engaging him in close combat when they've got these massive ballistas massively enchanted? And I said, well, obviously they've been all honourable and then betrayed him. Why would he have Tottenville there? Like, of all of his 7, the one that's never fought in any battles, the one that's a massive pacifist, like, Why? Oh, it's because he wants to make an alliance with the Minotaurs. And then they've betrayed him.
That's a really interesting point. I don't think I've ever heard that theory before.
Yeah, that's
So
my old crack theory, which is possibly maybe not crack, possibly is crack, but I mean, could be either.
Yeah, so Polaric wanted to add on to the idea of Trey weaponizing his agenda. Also, just painting Floss in a better light because everyone hates Floss and calls him a threat to world peace and whatnot. Rosie, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, to go around with like what Polaric said, and I think Emuli is kind of in here doing the similar point, is I really think Trey might go full PR mode. Like we've seen him, he's really good at listening to people and understanding how these things work, with the Harass and with FedoHub. And I could really see him going full, like, look, Flos was made into a king of war by everyone else. When he was a boy, his kingdom was attacked and he had to fight back, and then the allies of that kingdom kept attacking him. And then the same thing is happening again. He made this vow. He said he wouldn't attack anyone. You all just absolutely slaughtered an entire empire, the Empress of Beasts, her empire, and he didn't attack until, the Knolls were attacked. I could really see Trey is going to very hard start pushing like a very PR angle to try to change and like use what people have been saying earlier about this possible Minotaur betrayal, about the agenda to free the slaves in ways to really shift in the court of public opinion amidst all of the chaos going on with Ristram and the Earthers. I'm betting he's going to use the Earthers as part of this, as like, oh, Flos freed all these people, blah. So yeah, Kyler, I totally agree too that as a person who studies PR and does it, I'm surprised there isn't an Earther public relations class yet.
So that's really been a gap in Rhyme's capabilities. They don't seem to do a good job of communicating to outsiders why they're doing what they're doing. So let's see. Eli was saying changing the narrative from Floss the evil king to Floss that frees those in chains. Yeah, so that's very much along the same lines. Kalara is saying that Earther PR needs to be a thing anyway, so they should already know how media works, but even Wistram wasn't really letting them do it. Yeah, so that was capability that they left on the table. I think there's a lot of things about Earth that the Wistram just didn't even realize was important, that they were putting down on Wistram kind of had blind spots about. So Pooh Dancer is typing something, and then I will move on to the next question if there's no other replies.
One thing is that with them sort of the breakaway from Wistram, the Earthers are losing access to a lot of that TV network ability now.
Yeah,
as well.
So they are going to have access to smaller networks, though, that have been cropping up, like the Visions of Chandra one. So it looks like Pooh Dancer is saying that Remy messaged Drossi, you get one shot, make it count. And then Drossi caught back at Yizime hard. And yeah, Yizime just set an assassin after her, so who knows when that's going to drop, and I'm sure that Aaron will be thrilled about that. So let's move on to this next question. Should Trey have opened up to Yolaz's Byries about the threat of Actelius Salash? Yolaz has demanded an explanation as to why Trey is doing all this chaos, and he said, oh, I made a promise. But, Yolaz of all people would have understood, oh, hey, there's this horrible abomination coming over from the last tide that's going to eat a ton of people. That would have, even helped him get Yolaz off his back much more effectively than saying, oh, I made a promise. So, yes, Spanner.
Admittedly, and I think most people thought this as well before the end of the chapter, that's not the promise that Trey's talking about to Yolaz, though, is it? It's what Amira said at the end, and I don't want to bring that up in case it's a question later.
Yeah, he spoke in very vague terms. So presumably it was mainly about what he was talking to Amaris about. But I remember there being, in the discussion between Floss and Trey before he left, he was talking about how whenever someone joins Floss's 7, he says, I'll knock over a kingdom for you. And I think Actelios was the one that Trey chose to get him on board. So Pooh Dancer is saying Trey is biased. He thinks that inversers are complicit in letting evils exist in the world based on his experience, which is honestly not that far off. Yolaz would be an exception, but how is Trey going? Well, I would say, how is Trey going to know that? But they already did their research on him in the first place, and that's how they recruited him. Polaric says, probably not, because this is way out of Yulaw's league. What the heck is he even going to do anyways? A gold rank adventurer versus an eldritch abomination that could be a world-ending threat? Well, Yulaw's, that's true, but through the inn, he has a ton of connections that I guess Trey has no way of knowing about. So Kel is pointing out that the Fae wouldn't even fight him. God and the Snake is saying it's a very big sell as well, and he had a very narrow amount of time, which is also pretty fair. And Eli wants to go off topic, saying he wants Elena and Trey to teach the Illuminary crew how to yo-ho a pirate's life for me. That would be a great scene. Yes, it was. They need more sea shanties. I actually came up with a couple of verses of a sea shanty about Balros at one point that I never shared with the chat group. But that's something that's, I think, waiting to be written. Yeah, so it looks like Kel is typing. Yes, a job for Rhythm and Brews. Absolutely. Oh, geez, I would have to look it up again, Spanner. It was, I don't even remember which shanty it was at this point. I'll have to dig through it, but I was just going on a whole binge through the works of Cole McGuinness on YouTube, if you're familiar with it. He has a whole lot of sea shanties in there, and I picked one out. So I may post some lyrics to that later. But anyway, let's move on to Chapter 9. Or not Chapter 9, but Question 9. The Koras agreed to infiltrate Wistram because of the Zirconian lance, the Earthers, and Eldavin's gimmick with the flying armor. It reminded her of a similar sight, only with drakes. Could this have been a reference to the warriors of the Dragon Empire that the first Koras fought to overthrow? That would have some pretty big implications. Quilliman?
So, first thing I'll point out is that it was Eldavin convincing her, basically his actions convinced her not to betray Floss, not the initial infiltration. So she was thinking, do I actually want to do this? And then she saw what Eldavin was bringing out and went, oh yeah, I do. And I'm fairly certain, considering that she fought against what is essentially multiple Teriarchs in the first Dragon Wars, and Eldavin is, well, he's Terry, but brain damaged. It's fairly, I think it's a fair certainty that she is just having reminiscent of, oh god, it's, well, I suppose it'd probably be old blood drakes in armour doing fire weapons and all that, rather than specifically Iron Man knockoffs.
Yeah. So, Hans is saying it might refer to the Blade of Mercy, and Grid Cube is saying it reminded her of the Magical Girl No armor. I'm not terribly familiar with the capabilities of that No armor from a while ago. But yeah, the Karas is probably thinking it's happening again. I have to wonder if some of those memories actually came directly from Eldavin's experience from the Dragon Wars, and he just doesn't entirely remember where it came from. I mean, that's a possibility.
You wonder that the number of dragons who were active at the time of the Dragon Wars and the amount of time that's passed since then, were they as powerful as Teriarch is now, given how much older he is than they would have been when they died?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Polaric is just bringing up a quote here where Fedo Hep looked completely serious and says, "My answer is serious, Teresa Atwood. Drakes and their ancestors, the dragons, are the reason the Shield Kingdoms came to be. When they united, they drove gnolls to hide under the earth, and they made such war that legends were made of the nations that opposed them and lived. Neither you nor I have witnessed dragon fire pouring from 100,000 drakes, and that was but the children. Working together with their parents, the dragons, they were virtually unstoppable." So that is, going back and looking at that again is some serious stuff. There's a reason why the Karas would, really want to put that down. I mean, geez. Linu is saying a Teriarch was strong enough to kill other Dragon Lords during the Dragon Wars and walk it off just fine, which is, also shocking to think about. Polaric points out that he was old then, too, even then. God and the Snake says that we know there was a long history before Teriarch started coming to age, so potentially there might have been one as old as he is now. I mean, yeah, we saw him, hearing stories from his grandmother, and who knows how old she was at the time. Spanner said, didn't the Karas walk with Terry at one point? Yes, there was an aside there. I don't remember what the exact chapter was. Polaric is saying it's 7.25. And Linu is saying just after he killed the Dragon Lord. Yeah. Okay, so I have one more question in my main question set, and then it'll be backup questions after that. So, speculation about Troy's new skills. He's got a Chaos Theory skill and Spell Refraction and all this wild stuff. So, do you have any speculation as to what this could do? You know, Chaos Theory, we were talking about in the channel, it might be some kind of planning thing. Kellis pointing out that Aaron scoffs at low risk Chaos Theory. Lina, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I think those skills will be like useful in planning multi-factions plots that are supposed to be ongoing in same time and affect many parties. And through this skill, he will be like able to understand better what is about to happen and what outcome he may cause by like introduction of another parties to his plans and his plots.
Mm. So, yeah, it looks like Ashok and Poo Dancer are both typing something now. And MEOI is joining in on it. Ashok is saying that Trey's chaos skills are mimicking Karavia's luck and gambling of fate. That's an interesting idea. But like we were saying before, chaos theory is interesting because it doesn't directly involve randomness. It's complex systems. So, you know, maybe this should be coming at it in a different way. So, yeah, it's interesting to think of. Spell refraction, you know, that skill got me thinking about, you know, what does refraction mean? I'm going back to high school physics here. God and the Snake posted this picture from a Dragon Ball Z episode with something he's calling Hellzone Grenade with all sorts of energy balls everywhere. So maybe we'll see something like that. Seems like it would be a potent combination with glass and light that he's doing. Poodancer says that he really thinks that Trey should try to use this class and approach to start slowly peeling off allies from the slave-supporting nations. If you really want to be able to end slavery and not just prominent proponents, you're going to have to go after the supports. Kel is saying, Quilly says that February 5th, same time as today, crack theory discussion. Yes, that's going to be amazing. I'm really excited about the crack theory discussion. That's going to be awesome. So, God on the Snake says, in theory, you could view the lengths Trey went to make sure that chaos would fall apart. Is that, yeah. And he also says that my theory is that chaos theory will make people more willing to take risks involved in his plans. M. Eli says that Trey reached level 30 very fast. He did go through a lot there, but he did it, just as Ed said he would. And Spanner, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just going on what you just said then, that's just made me have a think. Obviously, the two things that Eldivan is making Trey do, or was making Trey do, was level up his Sand Mage, level up his Light Magic. Now, given that now he's a Blood Glass Mage, or whatever specifically it was called, and refraction comes into it, he can do some. He's probably going to be able to do some powerful stuff.
Oh,
Light
yeah.
plus glass.
Yeah, there's just so much room for synergy there.
Oh, massively. And then adding into the chaos side of things as well. There's a lot he's going to be able to manifest with that, or at least I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Quilliman is saying, I won't lie, I'm somewhat hoping that Trey will go all mastermind and just getting straight killed like how we just talked about the old mastermind would back in Paradigm Shift. That would be an anticlimactic way of doing it. But I think he's in the running to possibly be the planning brains of the King of Destruction 7 now if he ends up performing Karavia's role like people were suggesting before. And MEOI is typing. So it looks like we have hit the 10 major questions that I wanted to do. So I have some backup questions here that we're going to look at here. Yeah, so once Eli gets this question out, we can look at some of those. Yeah, Chaos Schemer plus Bloodglass Mage plus Synergy equals the ultimate Illusion Mage. Wow, that would really be something. So that seems like something that the Ulsanoi would really regret not having on their side. So it looks like Spanner, Poodancer, and Polaric are typing here. Okay, yeah. So Spanner saying that he has something to say, but he doesn't want to mess up a question. I think we're getting, we've done a fair amount of mining of this particular question, but we still have some more people talking. Yeah, so Poo Dancer says he just wanted to ask a question in general. Who do you think got the most out of the Wistram attack? That's a good question. Certainly the King of Destruction won big by just getting Amaris back. They were saying, earlier that if they don't have Amaris there, the eventual defeat of Rhyme was practically assured. They need to have magic to offset the enemy's magic abilities. They got into that desperate situation in the first place because the Naravius Folan was able to use their Jinny to knock out Flows. So God of the Snake is saying Rhyme by far for sure. So Polaricus is saying, also, can we talk about Amaris, Viltach, and Theos fight? High-level mage fights are amazing. Yeah, those are almost psychedelic. It's like, the world becomes a figment of their imaginations, and then you just have to find a way to survive. And, nobody 111 is saying it was Flo's first real win. So, God and the Snake points out that who among the Rhyme party got the most out of it is a different question. I think you could argue Amaris got a huge amount out of it, just being able to eat food again and do simple things and make a difference in the world. None of them had that option. She had none of those options before, and then Ghazi could have potentially chosen to do a different mission if he wanted to. Poo Dancer says the Karas got the most in their opinion. Yeah, the Karas definitely arranged a way to, get a lot of benefit out of this particular fight. So, Linu pointed out demons won a bit, LOL, one archmage less, more chaos in the world. And, any victory for Sylvania is a victory for Linu, so thank you for pointing that out. M. Eli says that the Illuminary won. It was the first time in 8,000 years that pirates waded Wistram. Yeah, talk about a reputation booster. That's history book worthy, as Spanner points out. Kel was pointing out that the Illuminary got knocked up. Is that really what you intended to write? Yeah, knocked around anyway. Lanu says also the Iron Vanguard Balros had two archmages and one of them just died. So, yeah, I guess Verdun Blackwood would be the only archmage for Balros right now. Poo Dancer is saying, what will the Karas get blamed for? Only the Illusionoi know that the Karas even helped, and who's going to believe them? The Illusionoi might have to position themselves as being a more credible force instead of just joshing around with everyone. They should be able to bend the ears of powerful and influential groups just to, prevent crises like this from happening or to punish the people who did it. Nobody 111 points out that the Karas and Trey made a lot of enemies, which is really true. Kel points out that it's in the text. So, oh wow, I totally missed that. So it says Kel and Kenyon were pointing out the helmsman swore the Illuminary was knocked up, but the Guardian Golems hadn't wiped out the ship. So wow, at least buy the Illuminary dinner first. Yeah. So Quilliman says 3 line. There is yet, or as of yet, unseen Centaur ones. Hans is pointing out that the guards should know as well. Yeah, so Polaric has a prediction related to this chapter. Yeah, sure, go ahead, Polaric.
Yeah, I think this chapter is just another notch on the chalkboard for being a massive underwater arc next volume, considering we still have that sunken dragon ship from Strategist at Sea that we'll never got to. And in this chapter, we have the heavy featuring of Doramata and the name dropping of one of the Drowned folks' great ships. I can read the passage from 863. What's Tove? A ship, not her ship, but one of the great ships of the deep. As close as we have to a city, she probably maintains the wards herself, blah, blah, blah. The Heartflame Gauntlets, and how that entire poem has the line, to seek the Gauntlet's obsidian forge, go to the deep midnight gorge where Drake's hubris met forth of stone and sank to unmatched depths of one. I think people have talked about how that could quite possibly be underwater. And Risvarian 835 finally saying how one of the other free potentially surviving dragons described them as being, quote, an arrogant fool under the sea. So I know there's a lot of clues point to some sort of big underwater action.
Yeah, Eldavin too has been requesting, vintages of wine from the drowned folk and thing too. So there's been a lot of lore building up on them steadily. Ashok was pointing out Cognita's statement to Troy, "You have been marked." That's definitely going to haunt him later. You do not want to be marked by Cognita Truestone, especially because she's already in Chandrar, and that's where Trey is heading. If Cognita can really move supersonic, like they were saying in some of the earlier parts of the chapter, you may not even see what kills him. Let's see. Eli is pointing out that the guards did not know she was the Karas; they only saw a little girl. But if she's from Chandrar and she's that powerful, and she's the Karas is known to be a little girl, that makes it a very small, narrow set of people it could have been, in my opinion. Spanner, you wanted to make a prediction?
Yeah, I haven't read the other questions, so I don't know if I'm stepping on toes with this prediction. Feel free to tell me if I am. But the last spoken words in this chapter lead me to believe that Emeritus says, obviously, let all those who hold chains beware. That, I know. Floss, potentially the death of chains might become an ally of him, given what Trey's trying to accomplish, which is also the promise I was alluding to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's got Elena on board as well, because she's on the same ship as Trey.
Yeah, that would be a big political shift if Rhyme tries to outlaw slavery.
Yeah, and given that Vetohep's already going towards that goal because of Eren,
Mm-hmm.
Like the Chandrarian nations, especially those aligned to Rhyme, because the Quaras says to Trey at one point, I am looking back through the chapter slightly, it is towards the end, but it's something to paraphrase. Oh, here we go. You are the key to Jamina's future or death. All of you children are. That's speaking about the Earthers. And Elena obviously is Bezzy's with Kara. Kara's got the view of the world at the moment. She's the one who first showed off Wistrom having the old spy network.
Mm-hmm.
So
with that coded message in the music video.
Yeah, so I think a lot's fallen into place for Rhyme to have an up draft and look.
Yeah, so Hans wanted to point out a counterpoint to the Drowned Folk arc is there may be a dwarf home arc. Ghazi's armor is cracked and Dabble's axe is broken, so they may have a repair sequence going in there. So Polaric is very excited about that. And Mr. Europe, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just counterpoint to the Koros being discovered so easily by Wistrom because she's a Chandrarian, very capable young girl, is the fact that the Koros was actually on TV at the time, and everything you see on the TV is correct, so that can't be the case.
Yeah, so let's see, we have a bunch of people. The Kelt, the Demons, and Floss are all going to fight Rochelle. It also looks like even Ashkarash may be getting in on that action. He was thinking about exactly how odious Rochelle is all this time and asking himself, why didn't he fight them so much before? Quilliman is pointing out the old fear that Nier's thought got the Blighted King to interfere, the need to ally with demons. Yep, so he may end up pushing that button because, who else is he going to ally with? Polaric is pointing out also recently from 8.50 where we got more lore about the Master Smith dwarfs being exiled. Yeah, that's another good point. And then I don't even know about Quilliman's dwarf dragon theory, but maybe we can save that for the crack theory discussion in February. Lino is pointing out that the Blighted King's fear may turn out to be reality, and that would have serious implications for the world. Flo's had a mystery ally that doesn't ever come around before he went into his sleep, I think. It was a little early. Flo's brings it up a while talking to Trey and during the map scene. That mystery ally may have even been Askarash. I have no idea. That would really not work out well if he wanted to be an ally with the Knolls the way he was talking about, though, so who can tell? Yeah, so Quilliman is also pointing out the ending. Last night, I received a message of inquiry from a potential ally. Rhyme is not completely alone, and with Kelt to watch our flank, we are increasingly well set. So, I don't know, maybe that could be Askarash. Wasn't there a section at that point where Askarash was talking about how he wanted to, reach out and have more allies because he was inspired by seeing Pisces work? Yeah. So let's see. There was a couple of, fairly minor questions that I wanted to put in here, backups, or in the backup question pile. One of the things that interested me was when the Ulsanoi were fighting, they used dirty alchemy tricks, and they said even the drowned ones never expect alchemy, and that seems pretty wild to me because it's a specialty that looks like it would have a lot of overlap with the alchemist and mage communities. We know that there are sage specialists, and why would there not be highly trained alchemists living in Wistram? So, it just, it surprised me as a notion that they wouldn't have all these alchemical weapons, because adventurers do that all the time too. So, what is it about, mage training and the experience of these fighters that, allowed them to be taken by surprise with that? God and the Snake is pointing out Wistram is narcissistic. Magic is the be all and end all. And yeah, I can see that, but to me, alchemy is also a kind of magic. So, it's interesting. Spanner, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, just to elaborate on what both of them said, because I agree with God and the Snake completely there. What if you're in an academy for magic, and I understand, yeah, potions are pretty cool and magical. Erin's Wondrous Fair is basically alchemy minus a few steps. But, oh yeah, we're going to this place to throw spells around and that. No one's going to get a potion out and start launching it at someone's head.
Ah, yeah. So, yeah, that's a good reading of it, but it just kind of surprised me because I would have expected it to be more cross-disciplinary study, I guess. But then again, Wistram has been promoting, specialization. They kicked out all their witches, and they don't really talk to other magic user types that much, I guess, these days. Courier was saying that he sees it as the drowned ones are good at it, and they tend to be surprised to see someone that's not them pulling these niche, dirty tricks. So M. Eli is asking about what about the political dynamic that's going to happen in Naravia's Fallen after this? They keep losing big battles, and if they try to take Pomway, they're going to get their asses handed to them. Yeah, this could really. There have been some repeated blows to Queen Yizame's credibility. She may get in serious trouble with that one prince that she, impugned. That the great sage of Naravia has fallen knows that corruption is an endemic problem when you have a country that's that big. It's just too big to administer. And that one prince stood up and said, if you're suggesting there's any corruption, in my branch, then it's impugning me directly, which is, he needs to get his head out. But that was the stance that he took, and he may very well be seeking revenge of this country. The obvious Fallen was a deep strike with a tiny band to yoink Yizame. That's an item shows up with the inn and gets a magic door and says, "Why don't you walk out of this?" She may just take. Yeah, so we are getting close to a 1 hour recording, so let's wind down here. Spanner is saying, blame it on the voice of Queen Yizame here. Lanu says that Naravia is the beating bag of history. They keep constantly getting hit, and they soon might either have giant internal changes or just straight up collapse. I did have one last question here that got sent to me. So let me fish up here. It may be, pretty high up. Yeah, there we go. Mr. Wiggles had a question for the end of the discussion. If I were to rate the chapter from 1 to 10 and any thoughts I might share about it. So if I were to rate this chapter from 1 to 10, I would give it, I would say a solid 8. It was a really exciting chapter to me. The trying to follow the flow and the tide of the battle was, confusing, and I had to stare at it for a while, but it was meant to be confusing. So that's part of the experience. If I were to rate a 10 on chapters, that would be the ones like the Immortal Game, that just gave me goosebumps, or when, Aaron was singing to Pawn in Volume 1 there, or when she got the Wondrous Fair skill. Those were just such transcendent moments in the story. But, this was a really good one, in my opinion. I enjoyed it a lot. Kenyon, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think the chapter was like one of the best in recent memory. But maybe because I haven't reread chapter like volume 8 at all, but everything's really spaced out. But like in recent memory, it was like a really good payoff on like this whole buildup of this entire arc, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like a solid 9 for me.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. Let's see. Polaric gave it a solid 8 for epic. Lido was saying 9 out of 10. His craving for violence was satisfied. He even got the bomber he wanted to see so badly. Pooh Dancer was putting in rate chapter there, and then people were just dropping numbers. God on the Snake says this is, I think, after the null moot, I believe. Yeah, I don't actually know how far into the timeline this is compared to the whole null moot plot. We know how it is in reference to the Siege of Rhyme, but it can be tricky, following what is today, especially after that month-long time skip in the deadlines that we got. G-Van says he's got to be right, 10 out of 10. Polaric says the null moot has been since volume 2 or something. Yeah, it was really long. I mean, that's when they first started talking about it. So yeah, we started in volume 2 waiting for Amaris to be a thing, and millions of words later, so they're finally getting put on the playing field. So that's going to be exciting. Yep. So Eli is saying 8 out of 10 was somewhat confessed during the battle scenes would be 10 out of 10 if Charles de Treville died a messy death. Yeah, I mean, Charles is one of those guys that you love to hate. I would certainly love to see him get his comeuppance. Courier is saying that we would finally see her style over the other archmages like a cripple, which is amazing. Yeah, she just lives and breathes combat in the way that the other archmages don't. So Linu is saying also a snake died, so it's a big win and only makes it better. I think Linu is just a little bit prejudiced in favor of things that Sylvania would like, which we all know. Quilliman is saying that he wants to gush about how much Pirates writes mages. That's so neat. I just love the magic system and how varied it is in the Wandering, and there's just so much flavor to each small variation on magic classes, and gives it a real sense of being a huge world conceptually as well as physically. So Lino wants me to read. Lino reacted with a combo of blush and pout. Anyway, yeah. So Spanner says it's no Kasim Vero Chandrar, but it was genuinely amazing. I love that there. The slice of life that you get there. Anyway, it is now 4:06, so that means it has been about 1 hour. So I'm going to turn off the recording, and then after that, we can do the informal discussion.
And that concludes today's TWI Talks ACD After Chapter discussion. Please join us next time.